So your game for the night is A to B or U-turn games.
Okay, this is a really super important one, actually. So this is an emergency cue, but it's something that should be practiced on a regular basis. It's an exercise um, in rally. I think every dog should know how to do it. And basically, what you're doing is you're walking along. You see something you may not like. Your dog's getting a little bit too interested. Maybe you have your leash in your right hand and your dog's on the left, or however your dog is set up. I typically slide the hand that's closest to the dog down the leash and hold the leash in the other hand. And I kind of bend over with them and I call them around with me. I use let's go, whatever your cue is to move out of the way, and have them come around with me. And you go rather quickly when you do this. And you want to practice doing that so you get them in the habit of when you slide your hand down the leash, you're going to make that U-turn. What that does is it teaches them that when you do slide your hand like that, you're going to get you guys are going to make a turn, an about turn, and go the other direction. You can go either direction. You should probably practice either direction. And sometimes it's actually easier to do it and turn into the dog and go so that you're staying between the dog and whatever the distraction is. And as a rule of thumb, when possible, I like to be between my dog and the distraction so that
especially in close range.
Especially in close range, because the chances are another dog's not going to turn and bite you where it might turn and bite your dog. Unfortunately, not everybody does that, but if you can do this where you just slide your hand down and you either turn into your dog or away from your dog, but practice both ways, because sometimes you can do one and not the other. And going the other way, I mean, I probably do this 5 or 6 times a day, just because it's really good to do if you're working on a heel or a loose leash and your dog has a tendency to pull you a little bit. If you slide your hand down and call them towards you while you're doing this, they'll come with you because they're amped up and they're like, ooh, mom's here. And they'll go with you. And so this adds value to you. If you want to and you have them, I wouldn't go buy them. You can set out little orange cones and practice around those, but you don't have to. And
we will use also, trees and things in the environment to do it as well.
I use environmental objects as well. I use cats as a distraction, but that's a whole nother subject.
I actually play this game as part of my positions game that we did the other day. So when my dog is totally off leash and I'm using hand targets to get him where I want to be, we'll do a hand target to do that quick turn and walk the other way. And then that also works really well when you're turning into your dog, because as you put your hand out and start to turn, they realize you're stepping into their space and they can turn before you do, so you're not stepping on them. Mm-hmm. Since we practice a lot that way, I use the same hand target when we need to do it out in public because we see a distraction.
And for those with service dogs, this is a really handy tool if you're going down an aisle. And I don't know, you've probably met them, Penny. I know I've met plenty of people who either they're excited to see the dog or they're freaking out because the dog is in the store they don't expect the dog to be in.
Or like today, we were walking inside a mall and all of a sudden we had, it was us, me and Azul, and then the owner of the puppy I've had and Puppy. And I see coming at us this family, and this family has 3 little kids. I would say one of them was like a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and they were all on the backpack leash themselves. Plus they had several older, not quite teenager, but a couple of them were teenagers. It was a big group. So like 8 people all walking with us, and these little kids all at the full length of their, 5-6 foot strap to the person they were connected to.
They weren't on
And
retractables.
no, they weren't retractables, thankfully. But yeah, so there was a younger child. I would put her at maybe 10 to 12, holding one of the smaller children, and that smaller child was just kind of running amok, whereas the adults quickly shortened their handle on the kids that they had, just like it would be dogs. They shortened it. But here, this probably the youngest child, too, was maybe only 2, is running straight at Puppy. And Puppy
Oh,
and Azul both love kids so much that it overexcites them. Being a little bit too much for Puppy to handle in that environment, I quick stepped in front of them, putting Azul there so that if they did reach us, they were contacting Azul first because he could handle it better. But it was just something we totally didn't expect. You know, we were in a public place. We were in a mall, actually. So very public and lots of people we couldn't control. But to see that big of a crowd coming at us and almost invading our space instantly, it's one of those distractions you don't plan for or predict. You know, Azula's had lots of practice with kids, but we never expected to see this come along.
you've planned for it because you've trained Azul how to deal with it.
Right.
But
Right. But this
you,
was a
it's
little
not
bit beyond
predictable,
what we've planned.
right? But so there's plenty of, I will get a video of A to B up tomorrow. And well, I'll put it up. Anyways, so it's a really good safety skill, but it's also, it's a nice reinforcing skill. And if you take your dog in public, either dog friendly public places, if they're a pet or if they're a service dog, to wherever you tend to go, say Marine World or to SeaWorld or to, you know, Disneyland, they need to know how to deal with crowds. And this is a good way to have them like be able to exit if you see something coming that you need to deal with.
Yes, we do a lot of it. Now,
And
Azul, if it's with his biggest distraction, which you guys all know it's dogs, we're on day 3 here, so I talk a lot about Azul coming into dogs. He really struggles with a U-turn if it's a dog he's never met before. So instead of actually doing the full U-turn, we'll turn at a 90-degree angle in that high distraction environment because that works better for him. He can still kind of see the distraction, but we're able to add that distance that we need to make it safe for everyone.
Nick has the same issue. I mean, he has a different issue, but his same issue is dogs. And so it's just, and it's typical of adolescent dogs to have issues.
They haven't learned all the social graces yet.
No, they're like teenage kids. They haven't learned everything, and especially boy dogs, you know, they're like teenage boys. They just don't know when to stop.
Are you saying they have a one-track mind?
Probably. That testosterone's a pretty powerful hormone. But, you know, and that's our job is, you know, they're born into the canine world. They don't know how to function in the human world. We expect them to come out pre-trained, especially border collie owners, because they act like border collies act like they came out pre-trained. Poodles pretty much too, but there's a certain level, you know, and it's, you know, service dogs are more susceptible to a lot of this as well because they're in environments that other dogs are not in, and they have to function in an environment that other dogs don't at a much younger age. And so distractions are a really big thing to train with. And I know somebody who used to work for guide dogs, and she said every dog that went through the program at one point or another had these issues. Now, what you see on the guide dog show, I forgot what the movie's name is. You know, they show you the best of the dogs behaving themselves. One of the dogs
with Facebook accounts. Everybody puts their best videos forward. You don't see people making mistakes very often. I try to share those mistakes because I want people to learn from my mistakes so they don't have to make the same mistakes. But most trainers will not do that.
Nick has had a significant problem with Huskies for a variety of, because he's had some bad encounters with the variety of Huskies. And today he was taking a mock CGC he would have passed. but we were walking by and there was a not so nice husky, and Nick has been in not quite himself for at least the last week. And he couldn't control himself while we were in the presence of the husky. So in a matter of, I'd say 5 feet, he reacted and calmed down. And then we walked immediately past cats, and he didn't care about the cats. And so I know a couple weeks ago, he got snapped at by a husky. So, and lunged at, and there was another dog in the class that also got lunged at by the same husky. And then he got kind of growled at by one of the dogs in the class that he doesn't get along with. They don't have to get along with everybody. But we do need to be aware of what our dog's weaknesses are, so that if we can potentially avoid those issues, we do, because dogs will be dogs and we can train them to a certain extent, but they have, just like we do, they have emotions, they have feelings, they have reactions, and we want them as non-reactive as possible, but sometimes it takes longer.
And everybody reacts. Even we as people, we all react. If we're having a bad day pain-wise or health-wise, we're going to react poorly. If we're having a great day where we feel awesome, we might react to that same distraction better. We might even enjoy that distraction. Everybody reacts, every dog reacts. So it's a matter of controlling the reaction or getting past the reaction in a somewhat, in that under threshold, somewhat under control, even if it's the dog self-controlling himself. I don't mean under control as he's my dog and I have Azul under control. I mean, the dog is able to control himself around the distraction is the goal.
It's the goal. Right. They should just, what we're doing with young dogs is we're teaching them how to respond and what we expect. And, personally, had that not been, I had my evaluator behind me, following me, and she had directed me to specifically to walk by this dog. And I had specifically questioned putting Nick on my right side instead of my left, and she said, fine. So I did. And that was just so I could be between him and the other dog. And the other dog's person was in line and wasn't paying attention to it. So it reacted to Nick, and Nick responded to it. However, had I not been taking a test, I would not have, and had I not been directed to walk Nick by that dog, I would not have walked Nick by that dog.
Correct, because it's a dog you can't control. You don't know what they're going to do.
I have no idea how that dog is going to respond.
And it's a problem area for Nick.
And I know it's Nick's problem. Correct. I know it's Nick's weakness.
So always set your dog up for success. Don't ask them to do something that is beyond their ability to do.
And try and use the tools we've given you. Refer back as much as you need to what's going on, because they're good tools, they work. And it's, the ADA doesn't say your dog has to be perfect. It says it has to be under control of the handler. Being under control of the handler is not, doing your best to set the dog up so that, the skipping child doesn't come by demanding to pat your dog. If the child is doing that, that's what management in the store's for.
Right.
But avoid the situation. If you know the situation is going to cause a problem, avoid it if you can.
Right.
You can't always, but if you can. So what I did in the situation was I just hightailed out of it, and because Nick couldn't think, he didn't know what to do. And he was on a flat collar. He wasn't on his gentle leader because he was taking a mock test. And the thought was, well, let's see how he does. I was kind of joking around before. Well, if he passes, what I said, what are you going to do if he passes? Then he passes. I'm like, okay. So I wasn't, so we have to do it again.
Oh, well.
So what? It's not the end of the world.
I think we should kind of wrap up here, being that I know this one is kind of long.
We did another
We hope
long
you had
one.
fun. We want to
Yes.
thank you for participating.